morning, guys. I'm going to show you how to factor a polynomial because you have a test tomorrow, or rather a quiz tomorrow. You are going to be allowed to use those guided notes that were provided for you online. They're actually attached and completed, so you actually have this form. But I'm going to show you how to use this form to check to make sure that you're not missing any steps while you're factoring, and it will help you do the very best that you possibly can on your quiz on Friday, okay? So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to look at my graphic organizer, and it says, is it in standard form? Meaning, is my polynomial in standard form? I hope you remember what that means, but if you don't, I'll remind you. Standard form means that my exponents are in descending order. So I'm going to check these out. It says to the third, to the second, to the fourth. It is not in standard form. So the very first thing that I'm going to have to do is move these expressions so that they are in standard form. So I'm going to put this 20x to the fourth first because it has the highest exponent. I'm going to then follow with 6x to the third because that's the next highest exponent, and then minus x squared. And now it's in descending order, 4, 3, 2. So it's in standard form. Did it. I'm going to read the next question. It says, is there a GCF of these three terms? Is there something that all three of these terms are divisible by that they have in common? And I know that all of these numbers can be divided by 2. In fact, that's the largest number that any one of these can be divided by that's the same. And then I'm going to check out the variables. They all have x's, so I know I'm going to take out an x. They have a GCF of an x. Now I need to figure out what the exponent would be. So I'm going to look at these, 4, 3, 2. Whichever the smallest exponent is, that's what the GCF is because I can't take more than 2 away from here. So that's why it's 2x squared. I'm going to ask you the same question that I've asked you in class several times. I'm going to divide each one of these terms by this GCF. How many terms should I get inside of the set of parentheses after I divide out the GCF? And you would probably say back to me, 3, because there are 3 terms to begin with. I'm going to divide 3 times. I'm going to get 3 new terms on the inside of the parentheses. So let's do that part together. When I divide the terms, I do the coefficient divided by the coefficient. So 20 divided by 2 is 10. And then I do the variable divided by the variable. When I divide variables, the rule is that I subtract the exponents. So I'm going to have 20 divided by 2 is 10, and then x to the 4 minus 2 is x to the second. I'm going to move on to my second term now. I have 6x to the third divided by 2x squared. So coefficient divided by coefficient, 6 divided by 2 is 3. And when I divide my variables, I subtract my exponents. So x to the 3 minus 2 is just a single x. And then I'm going to divide out my last term, negative 8x squared divided by 2x squared. So coefficient divided by coefficient. Negative 8 divided by 2 is negative 4. And when I divide my variables, I subtract my exponents. So 2, I took 2 out so I don't have any x's left. I'm done. When you were in class, we said, take that GCF that you just factored out and drop it down and save it till the very end, 2x squared. Because it's still part of my factored answer. I just don't want it to mess me up while I have to factor the inside of these parentheses. So I'm going to leave it for later. What I do know is that my final answer is going to be a binomial times a binomial. So I can even draw in that set of parentheses to remind myself not to forget my original GCF and to remind myself what my final factored form will look like. All right, good, we did it. Took it out. Now I'm going to ask myself, how many terms do I have inside this set of parentheses? I have 1, 2, 3. I have a trinomial. I have 3 terms. So the rule is, if I have 3 terms, the way to factor that is complete that cross that we've done. And when you do the cross, I take the first coefficient and I multiply by the last number. So 10 times negative 4 is negative 40. In this bottom box, I take the center term, which is a 3, and I place it there. And then I think about all the things that multiply to be 40 because that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to multiply to be 40. So I know that there's 1 times 40, 2 times 20, 4 times 10, and there's 5 times 8. The next part of this, when I'm filling in these numbers here, I know that I need to multiply to get a negative number. That tells me a lot about my numbers over here. It means that one of the numbers has to be positive, one of the numbers has to be negative, because that's the only way to multiply multiply to get a negative. A negative times a positive gives me a negative. So I know those are the signs of my numbers. So now I'm really trying to subtract to get 3, okay? So I know that 1 and 40 are never going to make 3. 2 and 20, never going to make 3. 4 and 10, never going to make 3. 8 and 5, though, that works. 8 minus 5 does give me 3. And I'm now going to place an X on the end of each one of these terms, because after I make the cross, what I'm really doing is I'm replacing this middle term in this trinomial, because I actually can't factor 3 terms. I need there to either be 2 terms, or I need to expand it to 4 terms. So if I have these 3, what I'm really doing is I'm going to remove the middle term, replace it with these 2 terms, so that I can stretch this polynomial to 4 terms. Because the truth is, 8 minus 5 is 3. So we're not changing the value, we're just changing the number of terms that we have, okay? So I'm going to rewrite my polynomial now. The first term stays as it is, 10x squared. It's the middle term that I'm getting rid of, and I'm replacing it with 8 minus 5, which is the same thing as 3. So plus 8x minus 5x, and my last term stays exactly the same, minus 4. Great, I've done the first 2 steps here. The last step says, well, now that you have 4 terms, good news. You know how to factor this. You can group. To group, I just simply split the polynomial in half, and I make sure that sign stays with the third term. Now I have 2 sets of 2 terms, or I have 2 binomials that I need to factor. When I look at my chart, it says how many terms do I have? Well, now I have 2. And when I have 2 terms, I'm going to check, do I have a difference of 2 squares? 10's not a perfect square, so I know I don't have a difference of 2 squares. I don't even have a difference, so I know that it's not this. I'm going to factor out a GCF, though. So when I look here, the GCF of 10x squared and 8x is 2x, and I know that 2 is the greatest number that 10 and 8 can both be divided by. I know that they both have an x, and I know that this x has an exponent of 1, so I can't take any more than 1 out from here. All right. I'm going to divide this term out from each one of these terms. So 10x squared divided by 2x. 10 divided by 2 is 5. I had x to the second. I took out 1x, so I have a single x left. Plus 8x divided by 2x. 8 divided by 2 is 4. I had an x, but I took the x out, so I'm done over here. I'm going to factor these 2 terms over here now. The GCF over here. Well, here's what I know. If the first term has a negative sign on it, I'm absolutely going to take a negative out. And then when I look at these 2 terms, the only other thing that they're both divisible by is a 1. So I'm going to take out a negative 1 and watch what happens. Negative 5x divided by negative 1. And negative divided by negative gives me a positive. 5 divided by 1 is 5. And I didn't take any x's out, so the x is still there. Negative 4 divided by negative 1. Negative divided by negative is a positive. 4 divided by 1 is 4. Here's what I know. This is great news. I know that I'm right, that I factored correctly, because my parentheses match. They're identical. So I'm going to rewrite that expression once in here. 5x plus 4. And then I'm going to take the 2 GCFs that I took out, and I rewrite them in the second set. 2x minus 1. And I am done now. I know that I have my original GCF. I factored that trinomial into 2 binomials. And this is my factored answer. All right, guys, I hope you do really well on Friday. If you have any questions at all, make sure that you are reaching out to me or Miss Stetson. You can use Remind, or you can talk to us through Google Classroom, okay? Take care. Ask any questions you want. If you need another tutorial, leave a message or leave a question, and we'll put something else up, okay? Take care. Stay safe.